Hello and welcome to this video. My name's Barry Beckham. The subject here is on Photoshop, so stay with us. Now you know the drill for YouTube. Please subscribe if you enjoy my videos, but don't forget to hit that notification bell because YouTube will then inform you whenever I post new content. It's all very convenient. Now it's midway through 2020 and we're all very familiar with those times during lockdown when we have very little to do. Well, maybe that's the time when we do a little bit of experimenting with Photoshop and filters. It's actually quite therapeutic. Start with an image with no preconceived ideas what we're going to do with it, and we just follow our nose. Now I've made quite a number of videos using Topaz impression filters in the past. So this time let's take a look at Alien Skin and their filters SnapArt 4. SnapArt's available online as a download for around about 115 Australian dollars, about 79 US and 65 pounds. Now we've never had quite so many opportunities and as much flexibility as we do now. So if you have a few minutes to spare, let's take a look at SnapArt 4. What sort of image should we select if we're intending to apply filters? My experience tells me something with a bold subject. They often work the best, but there's always going to be exceptions, of course. Now I'm going to be working here with a raw image and a recognisable place with Sydney Harbour Bridge taking centre stage. I'm going to be opening my raw image as a smart object, which means that after I open the image into Photoshop from Adobe Camera Raw, I have a quick and easy, non-destructible route back to Adobe Camera Raw anytime I need it. Now as you can see, I've opened up the image into Adobe Camera Raw. I mentioned a smart object a few moments ago. If you'd like to turn on the smart object status, go to the bottom center of the screen, there's a hyperlink. Click the hyperlink and you'll find the little box you need to tick is down at the bottom. Once you tick it, it'll remain ticked until you decide to remove it. I'd like to begin the manipulation of this with just a bit of a crop, a little bit from the bottom. So I'm going to go to the top right, pick up my crop tool. I just want to come up a little bit, just take off that little bit of shadow. Gives the image a bit more of an elongated shape, and I suppose I could pinch a bit from the sky. All purely personal. Hit the enter key when you're ready and I'll hit Ctrl-0 to fit the image on screen. If we're going to add a filter effect to this image, maybe more than one filter effect, what do we need to do with the manipulation of it? Well, we really don't know for sure because we could affect the colour, contrast and clarity simply by adding a filter. But we're working with a smart object, so we have the benefit of being able to make adjustments to our raw image even after we've added a filter effect. I'm going to make a start with my basic tab, which is a pretty normal place to start, and I'm going to take a look at the colour balance. I'm going to select the white balance tool because if we go over to the left hand side, the superstructure of the cruise ship, we'd expect to see that white and it's quite blue. So I'm going to click and you can see how that adjusts the colour balance. Maybe it makes it a little too warm over on the right hand side, so I can always fine tune things by going back to the temperature and just dropping that back a little bit. What I'd like to do next is looking up at the histogram at the top right of the screen. That looks okay, but maybe I can squeeze a little whites in there to improve the contrast, bring the blacks down to do the same thing, maybe a little bit of clarity. I don't think I need any colour in the image. Maybe I could just darken the sky just a little bit, and I could do that with a graduated filter. So selecting that from the toolbox, I'll click and draw down the top to take a look at that. and all I want to do is to reduce the exposure just a little bit there, and that's not looking too bad at all. With the image opened up into Photoshop, I've sat back and looked at the image for a few moments and wondered why I didn't put a graduated filter on the base of the image, because the sky looks good, the middle distance looks good, but the base maybe looks a little bit on the bright side. So it does give me the opportunity to demonstrate how easily we can open up a smart object back into Adobe Camera Raw. We have on the bottom right corner of the thumbnail a little icon that tells us we're working with a smart object. If I double click the thumbnail, we're opened up directly into Camera Raw. I can pick up my gradient filter, I can click and drag up the screen, and I can make the changes that I'd like to make. That looks a little better. Just touching the Z key to go back to the other tabs, because looking at this white square, which I'm going to do something about the end of the wall there, but maybe if I drop the highlights down I can kill a little bit of the brightness. And now I can just click OK, and what we're effectively doing is updating the raw file that we originally opened. And it doesn't look too bad now. I think we can begin to think about applying our filters. Let's go up to the filters menu at the top left of the screen, and there's the alien skin, and I've only got one set of their filters, which is Snap Art 4. Now when we open Snap Art 4, on the left hand side we see a series of categories which contain filter presets. Now we can close these down and look at them one at a time, but what I like about them is how these presets give you a good idea of exactly what they're going to do to your picture instantly. And of course we can jump from one to the other to find something which we find appealing. I'm going to go back to the impasto because I think I may use one of these. Let's have a look at abstract. That looks a little too abstract for me. Impressionist. You can see how quick these are applied to a high resolution image. Thick paint. One of the things you'll notice if you look over to the right hand side is we do have a number of sliders where we can make adjustments to the presets that we're looking at. Now the preset we're looking at here doesn't look too bad at all. Textured canvas, not quite so happy with that one. Vignette, doesn't seem to be a great deal different between that one and the detailed. I think we'll move forward with one of these. So all I'm going to do here is go down and apply it. It'll open up in Photoshop and you'll see exactly in real time how long that takes. Remember, it's being applied to a smart object. So when our filtered image opens in Photoshop, we notice that the thumbnail in the layers palette looks a little different to usual. What Photoshop has done is to apply the filter as a smart filter. What's a smart filter? Well, much the same as a smart object. It allows us the freedom to change the filter type or the settings of that filter after it's been applied, with no loss in quality. It also contains a mask, as you can see, but it's a different mask than we're used to seeing to the right of the thumbnail. This mask allows us to mask away parts of the image where we want to remove or lessen the impact of the filter effect. Let's take a quick look at what this smart filter option gives us. It does give us the option to apply some blend modes down at the bottom right corner. If I double click that little icon, the window will pop up on screen. I don't intend to use these, but I'll just quickly show you that they're there. And there we have all the blending options. The two parts of the smart filter which are important to us is this here, where we can double click and go straight back into Snap Art 4 and either make changes to the filter we've already got or change the filter as many times as we like. And of course the mask will allow us to mask parts of that filter away. For example, if I double click Snap Art 4, we're straight back into where we were a few moments ago. Let me select Impressionist, which is a deeper sort of effect, and I'll apply that. And that will give me the opportunity to demonstrate the mask. Because sometimes when we add filter effects, we can destroy some aspects of the picture that we may particularly like. So if I select the mask here, and if I go to the bottom left of the toolbox, way over on the left, you can see we've got black selected as our foreground colour. I'm going to pick up a pretty standard soft edge brush. I'll adjust the brush with the square keys to the right of the letter P. And I'm going to look up at the flow rate. I've got my opacity set at 100%, but the flow is very low, because what I want to do here is just reveal a little bit of detail by painting with my brush. So I'm bringing back some detail with those people. And you could enlarge the image and take much more care of this. I could bring back just a little bit more of the bridge, a little more of the features if it was necessary to do, and probably would if we used this sort of setting, and maybe even the lamp standards here, but you get the idea. Just to give you a really good idea, I'm going to hit the 0 key, which pushes my flow rate up to 100%, and there you can see I can take the effect of this filter completely away. And of course, the beauty of working with a mask, at any time we can change our mind and adjust it, or simply flood it back with white. Control backspace will always flood your background colour. So there's my mask there, returned to its pristine condition. So I'm going to make use of my smart filter by double clicking the Snap Art 4 icon, and we'll be straight back into the picture. I think that one was the one I originally selected, which I felt was just a nice effect. It just appealed to me. So I'm going to apply that and go back. Now, one of the things we have here is the opportunity via the Smart Object to make changes. So once we've looked at the image filtered like this, if I wanted to make maybe a little more of the lamp standards here, then I do have ways to do that. In fact, I can edit the image in as many ways as you can think of almost, but they're two good examples, I think. So rather than double clicking the Snap Art logo there or icon there, I can simply go back to my thumbnail, double click, and we're straight back into Adobe Camera Raw. Because if I wanted to select my brush, for example, from the top right, and I'm going to just click into that globe to anchor the point there, I'm going to increase the exposure, increase the highlights maybe. And if I wanted to paint over there, I've just got to be a bit careful. We would normally enlarge the image, but I'm working a little bit quick and dirty here, so we speed up the video. Now, the purpose of this, what I've just done, is to demonstrate really that when I click OK, what Photoshop does first of all is to update the Smart Object, but then Snap Art 4 has to update its filtration. But look at the versatility we've got with those two options there, a Smart Object and the fact that it's now a Smart Filter too. And we still have the mask that at the moment we haven't used with this filter because we can see all of the detail pretty well, I think. But just to demonstrate its use once again, let me just zoom into these two people, because these two people I think are quite important in the picture. So if I select my mask, pick up black as my foreground color and my brush, and if I drop my flow rate, I've got this little icon checked, so I can change this with the number keys on the keyboard. So let me select 10%. I'll adjust the brush size, and I can then be careful, but I can just bring through a little detail of these two guys. because they're going to be a prominent part of my image, I don't want to bring them back fully, but as you can see, it only takes just a few seconds to just bring back a little detail. This is very important if we had people in the shot whose faces we can see, because sometimes when we apply a filter effect, the filter can distort the faces to a degree that they become almost comical, and that's not very good for image quality or image interest, is it? So Control 0 will fit this back on screen. So we've got lots of versatility here. A little while ago I did demonstrate how we could reopen our smart object and make changes, and I lightened the top of both of the lamps, but after looking at my image for a little while, I think I'd like to darken this one down or take it back down to its original density and just leave the highlight on the main one there. So I'm going to double click my smart object. If I go to my brush, I created the lightness using one brush for both lamps. So if I just click the pin to bring the brush back into play, what I can do is use the eraser here just to take that highlight away from that globe, and within seconds, as you can see, we can be back opened up into Photoshop and the filter reapplied. What we can also do, we can add another filter, but there's a couple of ways we can do it. One of the ways we can do this is to go to our original filter menu at the top left of Photoshop, and we could introduce a completely different filter system completely. But I'll go down to my alien skin and also Snap Art 4, and just for a change I'll select the Impressionist version here, which is a bit different to the one we selected, and when I click apply, we'll notice that it'll appear just above the original filter that we can see labelled just below the mask. There we have it. So you can see they've both got a little eye, so I can always turn the eye off here. It just takes a few seconds for the software to redraw the original filter, and I do emphasize that my computer is certainly not state of the art. So what we could do here is maybe introduce the blend modes that I showed a little bit earlier on, because we could blend the two filter systems together and maybe create something unique, but I'll leave that to you to experiment with. What I'm going to do here is just turn that top layer off again, because I'm going to apply a filter in a slightly different way. I'm going to make a copy of my smart object. If I go to the right and right click, I can choose New Smart Object via Copy. Now the benefits of doing that, rather than just hitting Ctrl J, is both of these smart objects are now independent of each other, which means I can double click either one of them and take them back into Camera Raw, and the change I make to the top layer here will not impact the bottom layer. So that has quite a few creative possibilities. Let me just test one of them by maybe going back to the bottom layer. This time I'll turn on that previous snap art and turn off the one we was using before. Not sure it's necessary to do that, but I'll do it anyway just in case I'm putting a bit more pressure on my computer than I need to. So what I'm going to do is just turn off that original. Now you can't see the effect of that because we've got a layer sitting up here. As soon as a green bar has done its work, I can demonstrate that by turning that layer off. So what we could do here, we could apply a standard layer mask, because even though we've got a mask which allows us to lessen the impact of the filter, we can still apply a standard layer mask. If we do that from the bottom left of the layers, we can now start to mask through this image from below. What I'd like to do next is to flood my mask with black. Now black is the foreground colour in the colour picker at the bottom of the toolbar on the left hand side. Alt backspace will always flood our foreground colour. So what I've effectively done is masked the way this layer completely with all of its filters just to reveal the one beneath. So what I could do on this layer mask now is to switch my foreground colors over on the left hand side. So I'm now painting white. I'm going to stay with a standard soft edge brush. I'm going to drop the flow rate down to about 10% by touching the number 1 key, and my brush is around the center of the screen. I hope you can see that, but I'm going to use the square bracket keys to make the brush a lot bigger, because I could now do some experimentation of gradually revealing a little bit more detail through the important parts of the picture. I can keep the heavier filter effect just where I want it and bring through a little more detail elsewhere. We're all going to choose something slightly different here, of course. With the amount of flexibility that the smart objects and smart filters give us, plus layers and masks, we do have an enormous latitude here to duck and dive to our heart's content. So we need to bring this to a close at some stage, but maybe one idea, if I select the image that's sitting below, remember we're still working on a smart object here, double click and open this up into Adobe Camera Raw. Let me take the saturation off to create a monochrome. Click OK and we'll give it just a few seconds to apply the filter effect. So there's another avenue that we have up our sleeve. Now what I could do once I look at the picture, maybe I could go back to my original mask at the top. I can see there's a little bit of a gap in the middle because I was doing this very quick and dirty while demonstrating to you, but I could now make a little more of the colour just in a strategic area and maybe make the brush a lot bigger and the flow even less than the 10% we can see at the moment. 0.5 will do that. So I could just let the colour merge a little bit left and right and maybe a little into the sky just to make it look reasonably sweet. Well, I think you get the idea. Have you noticed throughout the manipulations here that someone has left a container sitting on the end of that wall? And even with all of these filter effects, I bet every one of you can tell me exactly what it is. It's a Coke can or a Coke container. So at some stage I need to remove that. Now just for the moment I'm going to drag my monochrome in the bin and I'm going to reselect my mask and flood it with white. Alt backspace will do that. So we're back to our original filter effect. I'm going to go down to the Smart Object Snap Art here, double click. Once these are up on screen, I'm going to switch to a different filter. Let's go to the pastel and we'll select one of these. Just looking at each one in turn. Not too keen on the white. That's the one I remembered seeing a couple of days ago. And I quite like this, so I'm going to apply that to my image. Did you notice it took away some of the contrast of the image? Well, we do have a smart object. We could go back into Adobe Camera Raw and push that up if it was something we wanted, because it may not be. But on this particular occasion, I'm going to take a look because we never know. Double click the smart object. I'm going to, I think I'll give a bit more clarity, a little bit less blacks, a little bit less whites, maybe even a bit of contrast too. Push it a bit. Remember, we can come back and undo what I've just done. I need to give it just a few seconds. Remember, we're working on a high-res image here. You get the idea. I think that looks a little bit better to my eye. I like a little bit of impact to my images. Now the reason I've done this, twofold. I'm going to add a texture to this image in a moment. But I also want to do something with that wall. And what I thought I would try is content aware fill. I'm quite a fan of this. So we can't apply content aware fill to a smart object. So if you were working as we are here and you did want to try content aware, we're going to need to make a copy of this layer. Now, just before I do that, let me just drag that layer mask in the bin because I don't think we really need that. To the right of the layer thumbnail, the smart object, I'm going to right click and choose New Smart Object via Copy. But what I also want to do is to rasterize the entire layer. Now we can do that with right click and rasterize layer, and it's going to take away the smart object status and also the smart filter status, but it's not really a problem to us because we've got all of that still sitting below with the layer that we can go back to at any time. But what we can do with this now is to move forward and deal with the end of that wall and the coat container. To deal with the coat container, I think we just need the healing brush, so we can go to the left of the screen to the toolbox. There's the tool we want. The spot healing brush should do it. You can see the size of the brush. That's fixed without any problem at all. What I'd like to do next is just to zoom in to the image a little bit because I want to see that wall, and I'll move it over a little bit. And I'm going to make a selection around it. So I'm going to pick up my freehand lasso tool, I think. I just want to make a freehand selection because sometimes if we use tools that make straight lines, they can be a little bit more visible in the finished repair. Now we can go to the top left of the screen to Edit and Content Aware Fill. Had I not rasterized that layer and I'd left it as a smart object, this option would be grayed out. But we can proceed. We can take the repair from the left-hand window and see the result on the right window. So I'm going to drop my brush down. If you look up at the top left, you can see the brush that I've got selected. We can paint and remove anything we choose for Photoshop to use as a repair. So let me just try a little bit of that, whatever that is there. I was going to say woodwork, but I'm not entirely sure. Well, that doesn't look too bad. We've got a little bit of a problem down on the left-hand side. Maybe it could do with the selection could have done with being a little bit bigger down the left. Well, let me pick up my selection tool from the top there. And what I'm going to do, see the little plus alongside it? That's because I've got this option checked here. So what I'm going to do is just ease that out a little bit. And then look over to the right hand side. That's done a pretty good job. Not too worried about that, but seeing as it worked so well there, let me take it out a little bit more there too. That looks okay to me. Now, yes, there's some work to be done with it, but what I'm going to do is to open this back up in Photoshop. If we look over to the right hand side, we'll notice that the output is a new layer. So when I click OK, my repair is sitting on a new layer, which gives me the opportunity to do a little bit of work on the edges. Let's hit Ctrl D to remove that selection, and we'll bring the image up a little bigger on screen, I think, and in the center. And then maybe to the right of that repair, I'm going to put another layer mask, because I think a little bit of masking along the edge is all that's going to be required. I need black as my foreground color. That same soft edge brush I've been using quite a bit. I'm going to make the brush quite small and my flow rate quite low too. And I'm just going to go around the edges of this just to make it look a little bit more natural at the end of that wall. Now with the spinning round of the screen, you can certainly see that it's a lot better than it was. We don't have that huge square of light tone drawing our attention, and now we can concentrate on the main centre of interest, which is the lamp on the left and the people enjoying the view of Sydney Harbour Bridge. Now, with all the filter systems that we have, smart objects, smart filters, we could while away many hours doing work like this, and it is quite therapeutic, as I've said. But at some stage, of course, we would need to flatten the image just to do the finishing touches. We'd need to save our work regularly as we go through, so I've been saving this, and if you look up at the top left, you'll see it's labelled Alien Skin Stage 5. So every time I've made a major change, I'll save a different version, so I've always got a chance to go back. But at some stage I would go to the top right of my layers palette, click the icon and choose flatten the image to finish. I think I'd like just a little more colour. Control U will bring up my hue and saturation. Just a little more saturation here. I think I'll just put a little bit of darkening over on the left hand side and the sky, probably not the base and the right hand side. So I'm just going to make a selection around this area. You can see the sort of thing I'm doing. I'm going to select and mask and make that quite soft. Probably we need to be up a lot higher. That looks okay. Click OK to that. I'll hide that selection with Control H. Control L will bring up my levels from the image menu, because I just need to tweak the edges down a little bit, and I'm happy with that. Control D, we can remove that selection. But now I'm going to add a texture. So let's go to the top left of Photoshop and go to the layers options. I'm going to choose new layer. But from the options I have here, I'm going to choose overlay, and I'm going to allow this to be filled with a neutral color of 50% gray. When I click OK, we can see the layers applied, and in normal circumstances we would expect this layer to cover up the layer beneath, but because we're blending it with the overlay, then we can see both. Now we can apply the texture to just this layer. Just before I apply the texture, I need to change my document from a 16-bit working image to an 8-bit. I can do that by going up to the top left of Photoshop, choose Image Mode and 8-bit. But if I go to the right of the layer here, I can right click and I'm going to convert it to a smart object. Now we know what a smart object is, but in this case we could call it a smart texture. What I'm going to do is go to my filters. I'm going to go down to texture and texturizer. This texture is called rust flakes. It's one of those that I've picked up on my travels over the years, not sure where. The ones we normally see in Photoshop are brick, burlap, canvas and sandstone, but I think I'll stay with the rust flakes. I'm going to leave the scaling as it is, or maybe I'll make it a bit bigger, I think, and maybe I'll increase the relief to about 6. Now when I click OK and we take a look at this, you'll notice we've got the same view of the layers as we had before. So I can go back and adjust my texture at any time. Now we're looking at a small image here. So if I just zoom in a little bit to a place we can observe, now we get a much better view of that texture, which I can change and adjust. Double click the texturizer, we're straight back in. Do we want to try something different, such as burlap? And OK, we've got lots of flexibility. Now I've just noticed my video is up to 30 minutes in length, and that's the problem when we start to apply filters. There really is so many avenues we can explore. Half the problem when you're doing a demonstration like this is trying not to get too carried away, because we could be here for hours. So I'm going to say, see you next time.